I used to be the kind of husband who was gentle, who trusted his wife completely. Then she asked to open our marriage and ran straight into the arms of her boss. Now she's on her knees begging me to take her back while that boss has had his entire career destroyed. This is the price of so-called freedom. Have you ever been betrayed so deeply that you wanted the whole world to see exactly what she lost? We were together for 10 years, married for 8. I thought our love was one of a kind, unbreakable. I used to feel proud that we were each other's first and only, until she started working at a new company. At first, I was happy she found new friends, but then came the late night parties, the drinking, the constant excuses. Family dinners were replaced by unanswered texts and empty chairs. I worried, but stayed silent, not wanting to be the controlling husband. Then one day she said she wanted an open marriage. To keep me, she claimed, while still exploring what she thought she'd missed. I was foolish enough to I met Emily Carter at the University of Houston freshman year in a line for bad coffee and better conversation. We were broke, hopeful, and glued together by the kind of chemistry that makes you cancel plans and forget dinner. We learned each other's families, scars, and Sunday routines. Our first road trip was a beat-up Civic heading down I-10 singing off-key with the windows down. We promised to be each other's first and only, and we kept it. We married under a cheap string of lights in her aunt's backyard, and it felt more sacred than any cathedral. In the early years, life was simple thrift store furniture, handwritten notes on the fridge, and date nights that meant tacos and Netflix on a sagging couch. We didn't need more. I truly believed that loving one woman well for life was still a thing a man could do in America. I believed commitment would outlast culture. I believed until it started to change. Change didn't kick the door in, it cracked it open. Emily landed a new position at a marketing firm downtown Houston. More pay, big clients, bigger expectations. New wardrobe, new commute, new calendar. Her eyes lit up at the challenge, and I cheered her on because that's what husbands do. But the rhythm of us shifted. Weeknights grew tight. Weekends got invaded by quick deliverables. She started bringing home stories I couldn't follow, agency drama, client fires, proposal decks. I made dinner, more ran errands, told myself this was teamwork. Still, I noticed the small things, her phone always face down, her laugh getting louder with people I hadn't met, a new playlist that lived in a different world than ours. A victory cocktail turned into late, happy hours. Harmless, right? I wanted to believe it. One Tuesday bled into another, and I caught myself waiting up lights, low TV on mute, listening for the garage door. When it finally groaned open, I felt our old life inching back. And then it didn't. Names started popping up: Jessica Miller and Rachel Lopez, office friends, who seem fun, fearless, and constantly in motion. They were always organizing something: wine nights, rooftop hangs, and midtown weekend reset brunches with bottomless mimosas. I liked that Emily had a tribe. She'd always been reserved, and I'd encouraged her to get out there. But the more she went out, the more the inside of our home got quiet. Group chats pinged in the kitchen while I folded laundry. Photos hit Instagram, neon signs raised glasses captioned with inside jokes I didn't understand. When Emily talked about them, it sounded like a club with membership rules. Don't be boring, don't be tied down, don't miss out. I told myself it was just a phase. Everyone needs friends. I remembered my dad saying, "You become who you sit with." I shrugged it off. I didn't want to be the controlling husband. But some nights, listening to her giggle in the hallway, I felt like a guest in my own house. Houston has 1,000 places to lose track of time. Sports bars on Washington patios that smell like smoke and spring rain, late-night diners that never ask questions. Emily started collecting them. "It's just a couple of drinks," she'd say, lips stained a little redder than before. I watched the playlist in her car change from our old country and alt mix to pop anthems about freedom. She started wearing a new fragrance I couldn't name. At first I tried to wait up, then I learned to sleep without her next to me. When she slipped in at 2:13 a.m. one Friday, heels in her hand, I pretended to be asleep. The next morning, I asked if she had fun. She said, "Don't be weird." I swallowed the comment and made coffee. A man can choose patience. He can choose trust. But every choice leaves a mark. I kept choosing, hoping the drift would slow. It didn't. It sped up, and I started losing my grip on the man I thought I was. I promised myself I wouldn't be the guy policing his wife's calendar. My mother raised me to honor a woman's freedom, and my father taught me that trust is a muscle. You build it by using it. So I used it. I bought her Uber credits when she stayed out late, texted, "Have fun," when the group chat lit up, and told myself this is what modern marriage looks like. I tried to fill the empty spaces gym extra hours at work, calling my brother about the game. I even planned a weekend in Galveston to reconnect, but it got bumped by a can't-miss team event. I held the door, smiled, and said, "Next time." The truth, I was starving my boundaries to feed the idea of being a good husband. I kept thinking the storm would pass if I stood very still. But storms don't respect statues. The house creaked with new winds, and I felt something quiet and necessary inside me, starting to bend. It's never just the schedule. It shows up where it hurts. Our bedroom, once easy warm, turned into negotiations. I'm tired. Big meeting tomorrow. Maybe this weekend. I told myself stress does that. I did the dishes, folded her sweaters, made the bed, hoping it would make a difference. Weeks stretched thin. Touch turned polite. Kisses became quick. I started to wonder if I had imagined the heat we used to have. One night we argued over nothing, dirty bowls, I think. I ended up on the couch, staring at a blue TV screen until the sun smudged the blinds. In the morning, she said, "Can we not make a big deal?" I nodded, but the knot didn't move. A man can live without fireworks. He can't live without being wanted. That was the first time I looked at my ring and felt off. Not regret, not yet. Just the uneasy sense that something sacred was being traded away, and I couldn't name the price. I heard his name before I saw his face. Daniel Brooks, new manager. Sharp under pressure, Emily said. He just gets things done. Then it shifted. He helped me solve a problem. Not a work problem. Something about mindset and boundaries. Words that don't usually come from middle management. The details were blurry, but his presence was clear. He started showing up in her stories like a refrain. Daniel says the client isn't the problem. The story is. Daniel thinks I should ask for more. I asked how often they work together. Enough, she said, smiling into her coffee like it had a secret. I wanted to give the benefit of the doubt. People mentor. Teams get close. Still, I noticed she dressed a touch different on days they met a new blazer, a brighter lipstick the way you do when you're trying on a better version of yourself. I told myself to relax. Then I wondered why a stranger's name was echoing in my home. Once you hear a name, you can't unhear it. Daniel handled a client meltdown. Daniel told the funniest story. Daniel says I shouldn't settle for less. The way she said his name wasn't loud. It was casual, too casual, like a habit forming. At dinner, she scrolled and smirked. When I asked, "What's that?" she said, "Work stuff." When I pressed a little, "You seem impressed by him," she brushed it off. "You're being paranoid." I wasn't angry yet. I was alert. I asked simple questions. Is he your boss? Does he text after hours? Is this appropriate? She rolled her eyes and said I was reading into it. Maybe I was. Maybe that's what husbands do when the ground shifts under their feet. That night, I picked up her cardigan from the chair and caught a whiff of a cologne that wasn't mine. I set it down like it burned. I didn't confront her. I told myself I would gather facts. I didn't know the facts were gathering me. It came on a quiet night, popcorn in a bowl, a movie we weren't watching. Emily glanced over and asked, almost kindly, "Do you ever regret not having more experience?" The word hung there like a test. I answered fast, truthfully, "No. You're all I ever needed." For a flicker, I saw something pass through her eyes. Sadness. Hunger. I don't know. And then she changed the subject, like she hadn't just cracked the door to something dangerous. I sat there with the credits rolling, wondering when love started needing comparison. The next morning, she hummed while packing her bag, and I poured coffee with a hand that wouldn't steady. Men my age know this moment. You feel a draft in a room you thought was sealed. You tell yourself you're overthinking. But that question didn't leave. It carved out a space. I didn't know it yet, but it was the first loose brick. And once a wall starts loosening, what's behind it usually wants out. I didn't pause. No, you're all I need. That line wasn't romance. It was a post I'd anchored my life to. My dad held my mom's hand after chemo. That's the math I grew up on. But the room felt colder after I said it, like a window had been cracked without a sound. I tried to bridge it with small mercies. Cougars tickets, our taco spot. A surprise Saturday drive down to Galveston. Nothing stuck. At night, I'd trace the groove of my ring and tell myself commitment outlasts culture. Then I noticed a draft I couldn't name. Love doesn't die loud. It thins like air on a long climb. I didn't know it yet, but a door in our house had been left unlocked. and something was already standing on the porch. She didn't clear her throat like a wife. She clicked into presentation mode. What if we open the marriage not to replace us, just to expand? Bullet points followed studies, couples who came out stronger, rules that make it safe. I heard a deck, not a heartbeat. Where is this coming from? I asked. Curiosity, she said. Life is short. Why not be honest about desire? Honesty, I thought, is a report. Integrity is a compass. I said we already had a good thing. She smiled like a manager grading meets expectations. Good isn't great. The sentence landed like a stamp. My chest burned, but I kept my voice clean. Somewhere between her eyes and that careful language, I saw a hallway I didn't recognize and someone else's footsteps in it. Is this about Daniel Brooks? I asked. A blink small, but it registered. Don't make this about work, she said. Then came the rationale. We were each other's first and only. What if questions were piling up for later? What if sampling now protected the core? That sounds like office talk, I said. Performance goals for vows. She said it wasn't about a man. It was about a life she didn't get to try. I asked, if Daniel left tomorrow, would you still want this? Yes, she answered too fast. The word bounced around our living room and came back thinner. I looked at our wedding photo backyard lights. Cheap tucks, the kind of joy that doesn't check options. Somewhere along the way, our marriage had become a market. I wasn't angry yet. I was measuring the price. We sat at the island like lawyers, no one in our home. Disclosed dates, protection. If feelings show up, we talk and we stop. Counseling on the table. She called it generous. I called it survival. We poured wine to make it look civilized. On her phone, the group chat lit like fireworks. I stared at the rules and felt the floor tilt. Paper is tidy. People bleed between lines. She said, trust me. I wanted to. I also knew trust isn't a pass, it's a promise with teeth. I turned my ring until the skin warmed and told myself borders on a map could still hold. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed and I flinched like it was a verdict. We cleaned the glasses. We said goodnight. I lay awake listening to the house breathe and wondered when a marriage starts sounding like a contract you sign under duress. I said yes, not because I wanted it, because I wanted us. We sat at the kitchen island like lawyers drafting a treaty. No one comes into our home. We disclose dates. We use protection. We talk if feelings happen. We keep counseling on the table if anything wobbles. I clung to those rules like a man grips the rail in rough water. She thanked me, leaned across, kissed my cheek, called me generous. I didn't feel generous. I felt gutted. That night, I turned my ring with my thumb until the skin warmed. I told myself boundaries on paper were better than chaos in the dark. We poured wine to make it seem normal. She texted the girls, and the bubbles on her screen looked like fireworks. I told her I'd be okay. She said we'd be stronger. The truth, I'd just handed a stranger the keys to our engine and hoped the road stayed straight. The first test came sooner than I expected. It always does. The calendar filled faster than I thought it would. Just dinner, just a drink, just seeing what's out there. She came home smiling tired smiles and slipped into bed with a kind of distance I could measure with my hands. I wanted to ask 100 questions, and also none. She assured me it was light fun, nothing deep. The word fun felt like a knife with glitter on it. I tried poker night with my brother, extra hours at the gym fixing the squeaky cabinet that's squeaked since 2016. My phone stayed quiet. Hers didn't. She was kinder at home, oddly enough, softened by relief maybe. But every kindness felt purchased with a cost I hadn't agreed to pay. I poured coffee in the morning and told myself I was calm. Then I saw a lipstick I didn't recognize in the bathroom drawer. Maybe it was new. Maybe it wasn't. I put it back like a live wire. The rules were holding on paper. In my chest, they were fraying. It didn't take long for a pattern to show. Her stories started featuring the same restaurant, the same work debrief nights. She mentioned Daniel less at home, so I knew it was more. I asked plain and steady if he was part of this exploration. She hesitated, then said, "We're seeing where it goes." The man in me wanted to pound the table. The husband in me kept his voice level. "He's your manager," I said. "That's not clean." She shrugged, like that detail belonged to some other universe. She said they had chemistry, that it felt adult to be honest about wants. I wondered when honesty stopped including the part where you say this will hurt like hell. That night, I stood in the garage, staring at the dent on the truck I never got around to fixing. Some damage you ignore until it starts rusting. I went back inside, sat at the edge of the bed, and realized my marriage wasn't hypothetical either. It was being test-driven. Friends told me to get back out there. So I did the awkward modern thing, set up profiles, took decent pictures, wrote a short bio that didn't sound like a resume. I grabbed coffee with a teacher, drinks with a nurse, wings with a lawyer who loved the Astros. They were good people. I couldn't click. Every laugh felt rented. Every goodbye felt like I was cheating at a game I hadn't asked to play. I paid the checks, walked to my car, and sat there with the engine off, listening to the radio say things about love I didn't believe anymore. At night, I'd lie in bed and catalog the day like inventory. Did I feel wanted? Did I feel like a man? The answers were fuzzy. I wanted the dignity of a path, not a maze. I started to think maybe I was built for one woman, even if she wasn't built for me anymore. Then a message pinged my phone with a name I'd never seen. Her message was simple. Your profile made me smile. Coffee. Sophia Kim. We met at a quiet spot near Midtown, the kind of place with real mugs and no neon. She carried herself like someone who'd crossed oceans and unpacked her courage in a new city. Conversation didn't strain. We compared clueless first years in America, hers mine in marriage. She told me about soul, her mom's stubborn grace, the way Houston heat makes everybody honest. I told her I fix things when I'm nervous, doors, bikes, sentences. She laughed, quick and bright, and didn't check her phone once. When we said goodbye, she shook my hand like I mattered. Driving home down I-45, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Ease. Not fireworks, not fog, ease. I parked, sat in the cab, and let it wash over me. It scared me a little. It also made me feel awake. I wasn't sure where it led. I only knew I wanted to see her again and see who I was with her. Our second date wasn't fancy burgers. A walk, a thunderstorm that chased us under a small awning where we stood shoulder to shoulder. Sophia listened like a craft, asking clean, simple questions that made me feel seen. When we finally kissed, it wasn't a trophy, it was relief. There was no scoreboard, no performance, just warmth and a quiet certainty that I was wanted for who I was, not for how open I could be. I didn't text anyone to brag. I didn't want to. I drove home, slow windows, cracked storm air filling the truck. At a red light, I looked down at my ring and realized it felt lighter, not because I valued marriage less, but because I remembered the man under it. That terrified me and steadied me at the same time. Emily asked later how my night was. I said, good. She stared at me a beat too long. Something in her eyes flickered. The game she invented suddenly didn't feel like it favored her. With Sophia, I didn't have to audition. I didn't have to defend the kind of husband I was or the decade I'd already given. She asked clean questions, listened without angling for a verdict, and put her hand on my forearm like I was solid ground. We cooked once at her place, cast iron skillet garlic popping, old soul music low, and she laughed when I reached for the heavy pan like it weighed nothing. It's funny what men remember a woman's eyes when you walk in, the way she leans closer when you talk, the soft check-in text that says, get home safe. I wasn't chasing thrill. I was recognizing myself again. When we were intimate, it wasn't performance or points. It was simple, steady, generous. A man can go a long time on that kind of oxygen. I drove home through wet Houston streets and caught my reflection in the window. For the first time in months, I didn't look lost. I looked like somebody's choice. At first, Emily called it cute. How's your little coffee friend? She'd tease like my happiness was a harmless puppy chewing a shoe. She told Jessica and Rachel that it was good I was exploring, that it proved our rules weren't one-sided. I let it roll. I kept my voice even, my schedule clean, my phone face up on the table. I didn't brag. I didn't hide. One Saturday, I grilled ribs for us like old times, and she floated through the kitchen humming a pop song about freedom. When I smiled at a text from Sophia, the kind that says, hope your day's easy, Emily's eyes flicked to my face and stayed there a beat too long. The music kept playing, but the room shifted. She set down her glass a little too hard. You're really into her, she asked. I said I enjoy being around her. The word enjoy shouldn't sound like a threat. In that moment, it did. Her smile thinned. Cute had a deadline, and it just expired. Jealousy doesn't kick doors. It slides in with questions. Where'd you two go? What did you talk about? Is she serious about you? Emily started asking with a calm voice and tense shoulders. She lingered in doorways, scrolled my face when I answered, looking for a tell. I kept it simple, coffee conversation, respect. She nodded like the words lined up, but her mouth stayed tight. That week, she checked my calendar more than usual, started wearing my sweatshirt around the house like a flag planted, and crawled closer to me on the couch with a focus I hadn't seen in a year. I should have felt vindicated. I didn't. I felt tired. You can't build a marriage on contests. You shouldn't need competition to wake up desire. Still, I saw it happening in real time. The game she started was finally playing her back. One night she asked, "Do you think she's better for you?" I said, "She's kind to me." Emily blinked. That answer hurt more than a yes. It came to a head in the kitchen, late the dishwasher humming like a warning. Emily's questions circled until they landed. "Are you falling for her?" My chest tightened. My voice stayed calm. "Emily, this was your idea." The words sat between us like a ledger. She stared past me at the window, at our reflection. A man holding a dish towel, a woman bracing herself against granite. She picked out 2 summers ago. "I thought it would help," she said, small. "I thought we'd be stronger." I nodded. I thought so too. Or at least I hoped I could survive it. We were both telling the truth, and neither of us was comforted by it. I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't want to lie to myself. The dishwasher clicked off, and the silence got bigger. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. I believe that, but want and will are different animals. I set the towel down and waited for the next honest sentence. The next honest sentence never came. Actions did. Emily started coming home early, texting me at lunch, showing up at my office with takeout like we were dating for the first time. She deep cleaned the house, lit candles, wore the blue dress she knows I notice. In bed, she reached for me first, urgent, focused, generous, in a way I used to pray for. If this had happened a year earlier, I would have been wrecked with gratitude. Instead, I felt like I was standing behind glass, watching my own life. I tried. I met her halfway. I told myself not to be bitter, not to turn every kindness into an indictment. But motive matters. It wasn't wrong. It was late. After she traced circles on my chest and said, "See, we're still us." I stared at the ceiling and counted the quiet seconds. Love can be repaired. Respect is trickier. The next morning, she packed my lunch and kissed my cheek. I thanked her and tasted the bargain on my tongue. Men don't like talking about numb. We talk about anger, about winning, about fixing things with our hands. But numb is its own storm. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I realized something important had flatlined inside me. Not hate, not contempt, just the pulse that makes a man lean in and mean it. I kept trying to shock it back. Gym prayer, long drives down 59 with the radio loud. Every now and then, I'd feel a flicker when Emily laughed, like she used to when she put her head on my shoulder during a movie. But it wouldn't hold. The night we slept together, out of routine, no fight, no fireworks, I understood the truth. I'd been dodging the marriage I loved, wasn't in the room anymore. I could act like it was. I could dress it up, buff it, and smile for pictures. Or I could admit it died while both of us were still breathing. Admitting it felt like betrayal. Pretending felt worse. She finally said it, eyes rimmed, red voice, steady from practice. "I want to show you. I love you, Michael. I'm happy with you. I want us back." The words hit like warm rain and cold wind at the same time. I wanted to step into them, let them soak whatever was left. But I also heard the echo of nights I waited up, of stories about Daniel framed as growth of my own ring feeling like a weight. I asked, "Why now?" She looked at the floor. "Because I see what I did, because I don't want to lose you. Those are good reasons. They're not the same as repentance. Repentance closes the door and throws away the key before it asks for a hug." I took her hands anyway. They were shaking. "I'm here," I said. "True, but incomplete." She leaned against me and cried. I held her because that's who I am. I also felt the distance sitting in the room like a third chair. The next day, she made dinner, my favorite ribs and cornbread, and set the table like a holiday. Halfway through, she said, "Can we not talk about them?" I laughed, once quiet and bitter. "About Daniel, about Jessica and Rachel, the committee that pitched you freedom and then watched our house burn." She closed her eyes. "Please." I wasn't shouting. I wasn't even angry. I was tired of pretending these weren't the players on the field. He was your manager, Em. They were your cheerleaders. They sold you the ticket. She gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles blanched. "I know," she said, barely audible. "I know." Tears hit the plate hard enough to splash. For a second, I wanted to take it back, pull the words out of the air and bury them. But truth doesn't bargain at clearance prices. She wiped her face and whispered, "I was wrong." It was the right sentence. It arrived after the wreckage, and that's a hard place to start. She stood up so fast, her chair scraped the tile. "I'm sorry," she said, backing away like I'd turned into a stranger. The front door opened and closed, and the house exhaled. I stacked plates, rinsed the pan, and stared out the window at the Houston night, humid, humming, indifferent. My phone buzzed. Sophia had sent a photo of a stray cat that keeps visiting her porch. "Looks like he picked me," she wrote. I didn't reply. I wasn't going to make any move from pain. I sat on the couch where we'd watched playoff games and bad reality shows and listened to the quiet tick of the thermostat. Men talk about fighting for a marriage like it's always swinging. Sometimes fighting looks like sitting very still and refusing to lie. The door stayed closed. The cat photo stayed unread. I took off my ring, turned it in my palm, then slid it back on. Not a declaration, not a defeat. Just a man breathing through a long night. The next evening, Emily waited for me in the living room, hands folded like a confession. "Close it," she said. "Close the marriage. I was wrong. I want us back." She laid it out, leaving the job, cutting off the friends, whatever it took. If this had come months earlier, I would have fallen into it like a man into water. Now every promise had to be weighed against the ache that wouldn't leave. "Be honest," I said. "Did you need to see me with someone else to remember me?" She didn't answer. That was an answer. I told her I'd think. I told her I wouldn't make decisions from anger. What I didn't tell her was that Sophia had become a lighthouse during a storm I didn't sign up for. Closing the marriage is a switch. Rebuilding trust is a road. I looked at my wife, at the life we built, and at the man I'd become to survive. Somewhere between those three, a decision was waiting. The counselor's office looked like every counselor's office box of tissues, soft lamps, a clock that ticks louder when no one is talking. She shook our hands, asked what brought us in, and waited like a referee who'd seen every foul. I went first. "I want clarity," I said. "I want to know if there's anything left that's honest." Emily stared at the carpet, then at me, like the truth had to cross traffic. The counselor laid ground rules: no interrupting, say the hard parts out loud, own your choices. I talked about the shift, late nights, new friends, a manager who became a soundtrack in my house. Emily nodded, eyes wet, and said, "We used to be each other's first and only, and maybe that left too many unanswered questions." The counselor didn't flinch. "Questions are fine," she said. "Secrets rot the floorboards." I felt the word rot. I thought of our kitchen, the blue dress, the rules on paper. We weren't fixing squeaky hinges. We were testing foundation. Emily said the quiet part. "I let my friends steer me," she whispered. Jessica and Rachel had stories for every season. Divorce reborn as adventure, dating as a sport, freedom as a brand. Wine nights blurred into talks about missing out and catching up. They laughed at wives who went home early. They called commitment cute. I listened jaw tight while she explained how belonging to a table can change what you order. The counselor asked if those women were married. "No," Emily said. "Single or divorced." I thought about cookouts with my brother, about men who measure love by showing up when it's inconvenient. Emily said she felt old at 32 in that crowd, like she'd skipped a class everyone else took. They made it sound safe, she added, like you could try everything and keep what matters. The counselor tilted her head. "And what matters?" Emily blinked at me. "Us." The word was small, fragile. I wanted to believe it. I also remembered who was setting the menu. We circled the name I couldn't ignore. Daniel Brooks, new manager, office star. Emily said he was confident, calm, under pressure, the kind of man who never stuttered when life got loud. Then came the mentoring quotes about boundaries, speeches about living authentically, low-voiced encouragement after happy hours that lasted too long. He said marriages can handle more than people think, Emily continued, and that exploration doesn't have to mean loss. I pictured him pouring that line like a second drink. The counselor asked if she sought him out or if he sought her. Emily glanced at the window. Both, she said. It felt adult. I thought about how adult can mean honest and how it can also mean cleverly selfish. I felt my jaw lock. Men like Daniel smile while they tally. They congratulate your growth while they pocket your certainty. The counselor wrote something down. Emily twisted her ring. I stared at my hands and realized you can be faithful and still feel like you're losing a fight you didn't start. I asked the question I'd rehearsed in my truck. Was it emotional first and physical? After we opened, Emily nodded, then hedged. It was feelings before she said. The physical, that was only after we agreed. The counselor looked at her, not unkind, and asked, "Is that the whole picture Emily said it was?" My chest burned anyway. I thought about the rules at our kitchen island, how I clung to them like a man clings to a railing at sea. We were honest, Emily said, voice small. We told each other where we were going. Honesty is not the same as integrity. One is a report. The other is a compass. The counselor asked me where my compass pointed. Toward dignity, I said, surprising myself with the word. Toward not being the last to know. Emily flinched. I felt the room tighten. The counselor suggested we schedule another session soon, that we hadn't reached the bottom of this bucket yet. I knew she was right. I dreaded being right. My turn to name what I'd kept clean in the corners. There's someone in my life, I said. Her name is Sophia. I didn't dress it up. I didn't perform. I told the truth simply. I feel seen around her. I feel steady, not dizzy. The counselor asked if I could step back from Sophia while we figured out if this marriage had a pulse. The request was surgical and fair. It hit like a hammer. I thought about the nights I drove home easier the way Sophia listens without angling the quiet texts that say, "Get home safe." Emily stared at me like I'd taken oxygen out of the room. "So, you're just keeping her," she said. "I'm breathing," I answered. The counselor held my eyes. "You can't rebuild 2 houses at once," she said. She was right. I hated that she was right. For the first time in months, I said 3 words that tasted like metal. I don't know. The counselor didn't punt. "I can't offer you a path to resolution while a third person stands in the middle," she said. "Book your next session after tomorrow. Use the time to decide what each of you is willing to set down." I stared at the boring carpet and wished decisions felt like math. Emily whispered, "I'll quit my job. I'll block everyone. I'll do whatever it takes." I heard promises like a fire hose aimed at a house already charred. The counselor turned to me. "Michael," I swallowed. "I can't make vows I won't keep," I said. "Not in this room." It wasn't defiance. It was respect for words that still mean something to me. The counselor nodded and handed us separate homework boundaries we would honor even if we divorced. Losses we were willing to accept to get to truth. We walked to the parking lot without holding hands. Houston heat pressed like a palm on my back. A storm was coming. I could smell the pavement waiting. 2 days later, tissues and lamps again. The counselor didn't waste time. "Emily, were there any physical boundaries crossed with Daniel before you opened the marriage silence? The kind that makes a clock sound cruel." Emily's eyes went to the floor, then to me, then away. "Not technically," she said. My stomach dropped. "What does technically mean?" the counselor asked, voice even. Emily's breathing hitched. "Nothing happened," she said quickly. "I mean nothing. Together." The counselor kept her gaze steady. "Did you two ever create a sexual situation where you were present for each other's arousal?" Emily stared like the floor might open. "I don't want to say it," she whispered. The counselor nodded. "Say it anyway." I gripped the arm of the chair until my hand hurt. Emily looked at me, shook her head once, and closed her eyes. "We touched ourselves," she said, "in front of each other. The room didn't move. My ribs did. Something old and simple cracked clean through. Emily came apart. Not performative, ugly, and human. Shoulders shaking, breath, stuttering, tears, and snot, and apologies tripping over each other. He said it wasn't cheating. She gasped because we didn't touch each other. He said it was just appreciating beauty. The counselor's face went still, not shocked, just grieved. I felt heat in my ears, then a weird cold that crawled down my spine. Not technically is a lawyer's trick, not a wife's vow. I didn't yell. I couldn't find my voice. Emily slid off the chair and grabbed my knees like a drowning person. "I'm sorry, Michael. I'm so sorry." The counselor knelt too, hand out, voice low, guiding Emily back into the chair, back into breathing. I stared at the tissue box because looking at my wife hurt like glare. The counselor said, "This is the truth. It changes the math." She was right. The numbers had never added up. I just hadn't wanted to see what the sum was. In another life, I would have wrapped my arms around her and promised we'd be okay. In this life, I bent lifted her by the elbows and sat beside her without lying. She kept whispering, "I never stopped loving you like that would absolve arithmetic. Maybe it makes it worse loving someone while you break them." The counselor asked if I needed a break. I said I needed clean air. We stepped into the hallway. Emily leaned against the wall like a boxer between rounds. "I'll do anything she said. I'll leave the job. I'll delete every number. I'll go no contact." I believe she meant it, meaning it isn't the same as undoing it. I told her I could hold her while she cried. I couldn't pretend the ground hadn't shifted. "I don't want you on your knees," I added, helping her stand. "I want the truth to stand on its own." Back in the office, the counselor asked if anything else needed saying. There was one more door. Emily nodded, eyes raw. After I pulled away, she said I passed Daniel's office one night. He didn't see me. Her voice thinned. He was telling a guy how easy it was to get me. Said you can't trust the quiet ones. Said I was a distraction, that he'd never leave his fiancée. He even joked he felt bad for you. You snooze, you lose. The words dropped like bolts in a metal tray. I pictured his grin, the casual cruelty, the way men like that turn other people's lives into anecdotes. Emily said she made it to the parking lot and threw up between painted lines. That was the night the adventure went from glossy to rotten. She said the fantasy died on the office carpet, that she saw herself the way he said it, easy disposable, and couldn't stand it. The counselor didn't say I told you so. She didn't need to. Some lessons arrive carved in stone. We walked out into the heat. Both of us changed, and not enough. Emily didn't spin it. She said the words he used, pleasant distraction. I could see them sitting in her mouth like gravel. She told me how he laughed with another guy, about how easy it was, how he'd never leave his fiancée, how quiet girls are the ones you can't trust. There's a kind of humiliation that doesn't shout. It settles like dust over everything you thought was special. She said the fantasy died in that hallway, that the glow turned to glare. For the first time, she stopped defending the story. No talk about growth or freedom or curiosity. Just a woman realizing she wasn't a partner in some brave experiment. She was a convenience with a calendar. I didn't dance on the grave of that fantasy. I listened jaw tight while she named what I had already felt. We weren't two adults exploring. We were two people breaking something that had once been rare. The night ended quiet. Truth doesn't need volume to break a room. The darkness arrived between sentences. Emily said she felt sick, then said she felt nothing, then said she didn't want to wake up to the mess she'd made. The word suicidal didn't scream. It whispered. I moved closer, not as a husband with answers, but as a human who won't let another human fall through a hole. I texted the counselor. I kept her talking. I said the basic things, the ones men my age know by muscle. Breathe with me. Sit down, water. Stay right here. She cried into her hands and kept saying, I'm sorry, Michael. I'm so sorry. Sorry is not a key that opens a locked door, but it's not nothing either. It's a map back to the wreck. I told her we would get through tonight, and tomorrow we would call her doctor. I slept light on the couch with the hallway lamp on, listening for her steps. A man can be furious at the storm and still hold the person it soaked. Morning found us puffy-eyed, sitting at the kitchen table like two survivors in the same boat. Emily said, I never stopped loving you, and the sentence hung there, tragic and true. Maybe that makes it worse, loving someone while you cut the rope you tied together. She reached across the table, palms up, a quiet plea for contact. I took her hands. They were cold and small, the same hands that signed our marriage license under a string of backyard lights. If you loved me, I said, voice, even why did you need someone else to prove it? She flinched, not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. I thought I was missing a chapter, she whispered. I told myself it would make me appreciate us. Love doesn't need extra credit. It needs guardrails. She nodded like a student who understood the lesson after failing the test. The coffee went cold between us, and for the first time, I admitted out loud I didn't know my answer. She made the pitch that many couples make when the house smells like smoke. Let's move, Emily said. Start over, somewhere new. No history. No friends like that, just us. I pictured hill country rentals and clean leases, Costco runs where nobody knows your face, the false mercy of distance. Moving feels like progress because boxes get checked and rooms get emptied. But geography doesn't fix character, it just gives it a new view. We could sell the house she pressed. New city, new jobs. Reset. I saw what she wanted, a way to outrun the echo of that office hallway, a way to bury the bad under fresh paint. Part of me wanted it too. I'm an American man. We believe in fresh starts like we believe in Saturday football, but I also believe in consequences. I told her I'd think. She nodded, eyes raw like hope had chapped them. The conversation ended with no plan, just two people staring at a map that didn't show the terrain. The sentence formed before I could coach it. It wouldn't be fair to Sophia. Emily blinked like I'd slapped her with air. I didn't say it to be cruel. I said it because decency doesn't have exemptions just because your life is on fire. Sophia didn't ask for our marriage to open. She didn't sell me freedom. She offered me respect when my house felt like a courtroom. If we were going to close this marriage and try to rebuild, I'd have to step back from Sophia clean, not yank her like a cord when I needed power. Emily swallowed hard. So she matters. I nodded. She treated me like a man, not a project. The room chilled. You could feel something break that had been holding on by threads. I will do anything, she said. Quit. Block. Therapy. Do it for you, I answered. Not as payment to buy me back. The words settled. The price tag came off. We both saw how high the real cost was. We took it back to the counselor so the words wouldn't drown us. Emily unraveled in that chair. No makeup, no spin, just raw edges. The counselor guided the storm like a seasoned pilot, not minimizing, not catastrophizing, just naming shock, grief, shame, fear. She asked me what I needed to not resent myself 6 months from now. I said time apart. I said quiet. I said no more half-truths in pretty wrapping. Emily shook her head like those words were ice water. Please, she whispered, don't leave. The counselor leaned in. Time apart isn't abandonment. It's choosing not to keep breaking the same spot. We set a simple plan, check-ins for safety, separate counseling, no contact with Daniel's orbit, no pressure to define the future by Friday. Emily nodded, then folded into herself like a tent in wind. I walked us out. At the elevator, she grabbed my sleeve like a lifeline. I'm scared, she said. Me too, I answered. Honesty felt small. It also felt like oxygen. My brother had a place in Midtown, 1-bedroom, 2nd floor, a balcony that looks over a parking lot, and a crepe myrtle that refused to die. He gave me a rate that felt like charity. I paid what I could so my pride wouldn't eat me. I moved in with a duffel, a toolbox, and the coffee maker we bought the year we said we'd stop buying bad coffee. The first night, I opened the sliding door and let Houston air breathe through the place. The hum of the city felt honest. No wedding photos, no blue dress, just drywall, a couch, and the sound of my own keys hitting a bowl. I set my ring on the nightstand and stared at the pale band it left on my finger. Men like me don't cry easily. We fix, we absorb, we go to work. That night, I let my chest shake, quiet, private, necessary. I texted Sophia, I need to slow down. She replied, I'm here. Do what's right. That mattered. The call came 2 days later. Jessica. Her voice was small, the kind you use when shame finally sits you down. She said she was sorry for her part in everything, how she cheered Emily on, how she called commitment cute. Then she told me the part I didn't know after Emily quit Jessica and Daniel crossed the same line. There was a pregnancy scare, then a test that came back positive. Stress turned the next weeks into a blender, fights, accusations, late-night emails. She said she lost the baby. She said Daniel accused her of trapping him. She said her boyfriend found the emails and walked. While she spoke, I pressed my thumb into the edge of the counter just to feel something sharp and real. I'm not a judge, and I'm not her priest. I told her I was sorry for her loss. I meant it. She said she was collecting everything, messages, timelines, policy violations. He doesn't get to keep doing this, she said. For once I agreed. When hell breaks loose in a workplace, it doesn't bother to knock. Jessica moved like a wrecking ball in a dress, HR complaints, screenshots, witness statements. Upper management couldn't ignore it. Daniel's fiancé got looped in. I saw her profile once, small town smile, special ed teacher, the kind of woman who wears kindness like a cardigan. I wanted to hate her for being the symbol of everything he threw away. I couldn't. She didn't do this. Reports say corporate uses words like fraternization and professional boundaries. Real life uses words like betrayal and humiliation. The fallout was fast. Daniel was suspended pending investigation, then gone. The firm sent a company-wide email with language so careful it almost squeaked. The fiancé took down photos. The rumor mill went quiet the way it does when everyone knows the answer. I didn't cheer. Men like me don't need trophies. We need the truth to stand up in daylight. It did. And it threw a long, cold shadow over everything it touched. Jessica asked to meet to get my account for the record. We picked a coffee shop that smelled like cinnamon and caution. She walked in looking 10 years older than her driver's license, dark circles hands that couldn't find stillness. She apologized again, not to earn a pat on the head, but like someone who finally believes there's a moral universe. She told me about the day her boyfriend found the email thread, how his face went gray, how she hasn't slept since. She didn't spin her choices. She didn't blame Emily. She said I wanted to be exciting. I ended up being disposable. I gave her the timeline. I had names, dates, the night the rules were written like they could stop a flood. She wrote fast, then closed the notebook and said, I hope you heal. I hope she does too. I walked out to the parking lot and sat in my truck. Across the street, a dad buckled his kid into a car seat. Ordinary. Holy. I breathed. Jessica didn't come for absolution. She came with facts. She said losing the baby broke something she thought was unbreakable, and watching her boyfriend read those emails broke the rest. I can't fix what I did, she said, but I can stop him from doing it again. She showed me screenshots, timelines, calendar invites that suddenly told a story in daylight. HR had them. So did upper management. So did his fiancée. I'm not a man who cheers for wreckage, even when the wreck is earned, but I believe in consequences. Jessica didn't ask me to forgive her. She asked me to be clear. I walked her through my dates. The rule we wrote at the kitchen island the first time not technically became a blade. She wrote it all down, then closed her notebook with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I'm sorry, she said again. I believed her, not because she cried, but because she finally stood in the truth without reaching for a cushion. That mattered. I picked a time I thought Emily wouldn't be home and drove to get a few things. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and history. When I stepped into the living room, she was there, elbows on knees, staring at a line of wedding photos spread across the coffee table like a crime scene. Backyard lights, cheap tucks, her aunt's smile, my hand on her waist like I had found a safe place to live. Emily looked up, eyes raw. She tried to hug me. I let her hands touch my shoulders, then eased back. I'm just here for a few things, I said. She nodded and reached for a tissue that missed. I packed a box with dumb, ordinary items, chargers, socks, the pocket knife my dad gave me. The ordinary hurts because it keeps going. She asked if I could stay for lunch. I told her I wasn't hungry. I meant I wasn't ready. As I turned, she said, I have something to show you. My stomach knew before my head did. She handed me her phone. New number, same voice. Daniel stripped of charm lashing. He accused her of betrayal, of ruining his career, of being crazy, of playing victim. The words came fast, mean, and practiced. You learn a lot about a man when he thinks no one is watching. Emily swallowed. I blocked the old number. He found a way through. I told HR everything. I told his fiancée. I told the truth. She said she'd read a form that said, expose the secret, remove its power. I believe she wanted to clean the stain. I also knew bleach doesn't rebuild broken wood. This took courage, I said, and meant it. It doesn't change what happened to us. The sentence landed like a dull thud, not dramatic, just heavy. She nodded, tears slipping without ceremony. I know, she whispered. I wanted you to see I'm not protecting him. I did see that. I also saw the distance between remorse and repair. It's a longer road than people think. We stood in the kitchen where we once argued about salsa brands and vacations. I did it for us, Emily said, voice thin but determined. I left the job. I cut them off. I chose you. I appreciate action. I'm a man who fixes hinges and changes tires. But some things don't take a wrench. Thank you, I said. I see what you've done. I let a beat pass. It doesn't reset my heart. She blinked like the lights flickered. So what do we do? I talked slow so I wouldn't lie. We stopped marriage counseling. I'm starting individual counseling. I need a place where the truth doesn't have to share a seat. She folded her arms tight like she was holding herself together. So that's it. No, I said. It's honest. That's the start I can live with. The plan wasn't grand. It was small, stubborn, and human. It also moved us out of fantasy. Sometimes the bravest thing a man can say is not yet. Not like this. Individual counseling didn't look like salvation. It looked like a waiting room and a printable form. But the chair was honest. No triangle, no referee, no performance. I talked about anger that comes out sideways, about numb, that feels like fog, about being a man who keeps his word until the words no longer describe the world he's in. The counselor asked what I was protecting. Self-respect, I said, and the part of me that still believes in vows. We talked practical things, sleep food walking when the walls close in. We talked spiritual things, what forgiveness is and isn't, what boundaries are and aren't. I didn't leave with fireworks. I left with a list and a strange steadiness. On the drive home, I realized I hadn't checked my phone in an hour. Not for a crisis, not for permission, just silence that didn't feel like punishment. That night, I emailed the marriage counselor and closed our joint file. It felt like ending a chapter without throwing away the book. My brother said, get information. You don't have to use it. So I made an appointment with a Houston family lawyer in a small office that smelled like coffee and copier toner. She didn't talk like a shark. She talked like a coach. We'll start with a consult, she said. Assets, debts, house, vehicles, retirement accounts. No kids. That simplifies some things. She laid out paths: legal separation, filing, mediation. You don't have to decide today, she added, but clarity buys peace. I told her I wanted to be decent without being naive. She nodded. Good men get hurt the worst when they confuse those two. I left with a manila folder full of checklists and a pen that wrote too smoothly. In the truck, I stared at the building's brick and thought about men who've sat in that chair before me. Different names, same ache. I didn't feel triumphant or ruined. I felt like a man who had finally put his hand on the map and said, "Here." I stopped by the house to drop off a bill and pick up mail. Emily had dinner on the stove and hope on her face. "How was your day?" she asked, like we were almost normal. I closed our counseling file. I said, "I'm doing individual for a while." The words deflated the room. She turned off the burner and stood there with the spoon in her hand like it might explain something. "So you're done trying," she said. "No," I answered. "I'm done pretending." She took a step toward me, then another, hands on my chest, breath shallow. "Let me fix this," she whispered. "Tonight, please." In another life that might have worked, in this one it felt like changing the oil after the engine seized. I set her hands down gently. "Don't make me the judge and the prize," I said. "I'm just a man who's bleeding." Her eyes flashed. Not cruel, just cornered. The spoon clinked as she set it in the sink. We both heard the echo. It came out jagged, full volume, the kind of line that makes neighbors turn down their TVs. "What does Sophia give you that I can't?" The house went still. I didn't shoot back. I took a breath because words like that can decide futures. She pushed again, lower, now hurt more than angry. "Tell me, is it looks? Is it sex? Is it mystery?" I shook my head. "It's none of that," I said. "It's how I feel about myself around her." Emily stared like I'd switched languages. Around her, I continued. "I don't feel managed. I don't feel like I'm failing a test I didn't know I was taking. I feel respected, calm, wanted." She flinched. "Respect is a mirror. It shows you what you gave and what you didn't. So I never gave you that," she whispered. "I didn't say never. I didn't rewrite history. I said you stopped giving it when you invited the world into our vows." The room waited for the last sentence. I looked at the woman I married, at the life we built, at the floor we cracked together. "If you don't see it now," I said, voice steady, "you never will." The sentence felt like laying a brick heavy square, undeniable. She stepped back like it had weight. No storm, no slammed doors, just the sound of a house adjusting to new reality. I wasn't being cruel. I was being clear. I told her I wasn't choosing Sophia over my wife. I was choosing self-respect over a story that treated me like a spare tire. "I will keep doing my work," I added. "You do yours. If there's a road back, it won't begin with denial." She nodded once, a tremor running through it, then pressed her palms to her eyes and let herself cry without audience. I picked up the mail, set the bill on the counter, and walked to the door. My hand paused on the knob. There was one more thing to say, but it belonged to tomorrow. Here's what I know now. A marriage without boundaries isn't brave. It's a house with unlocked doors in a bad neighborhood. Self-respect isn't pride. It's the lock and the porch light. I tried to be the good man by saying yes to an adventure, and I learned the oldest lesson a husband can learn. Don't trade the core of who you are to keep the peace. Love needs guardrails, clear truth, and the courage to say no before anyone has to apologize. I'm not here to sell you a happy ending. I'm here to tell you I'm doing the work alone in counseling with a steady spine. Maybe Emily and I rebuild brick by brick after real repentance and no contact with every ghost. Maybe I walk with decency into a life that doesn't test me for sport. Either way, I'm going to respect the man in the mirror. If you were me, would you rebuild or walk away? Comment below today.